one who has a good
Okay,
voice for
thanks.
podcasting is him. That's Foley. Mine's like the Weasley whiny voice.
See, I was thinking just the opposite when I listen back to our episodes. I'm like, welcome back, everybody, to the DriscollCat cast. This is Ryan, joined by my co-host, Ryan. How you doing there, Thorny?
I am doing well. Yourself?
Not bad on this dreary night over here in Spokane. You guys getting the rain as well?
We are, just a typical fall Washington day. Overcast, rainy, wet, a little chilly, the usual.
Pretty much here on out for the next couple months, man.
Yep.
Awesome. Right on. Well, if you're new to the CatCast, Ryan and I have decided to put together just kind of our thoughts on Montana State football and Montana State in general. We've just really been mainly talking about football, but we'd like to start all of our podcasts off with kind of what we're drinking tonight. What do you got? What do you got there, Thorny?
Tonight I have a Glenlivet 12, just nice and neat. No ice, no water, just a little dram, just a little pour. How about yourself?
Taking a groove call for me, the Miller Lite tonight.
Good choice. I think Choate would approve.
Last 2 weeks I visited the Perry Street Brewery over here in Spokane, and I just didn't get over there this weekend. So I seem to always have like a 6-pack of Miller Lite in the fridge, or some sort of like maybe even like a High Life. And then I have a beer that my wife will drink as well. So she prefers more of the pale ale, the IPA. She won't touch my Miller Lite, but she doesn't bother me having it in there anyway. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I typically have some Rolling Rock in the fridge. That's kind of my fallback, but I don't even have that right now. Just
nice.
Empty.
Well, we kind of have a new little schedule on the show today. We have our first guest. We're going to play that audio here in a moment. It's from a Bobcat Nation poster, DriscollCat. But then after that, would you want to get into the Idaho game just a little bit and maybe some upcoming thoughts on the second half?
Yeah, I think we'll just kind of touch on the Idaho game. We don't really plan to be experts breaking down, previewing games or anything too deep like that, but we'll talk about the game and see how much time left we have, and we'll talk about the rest of the season.
Right on. Why don't we just play that audio now? So without further ado, here's our first guest, DriscollCat. All right. Time for our first guest on the CatCast. Thorny, you and I have been talking a little bit as we've been planning this CatCast, how to reach out to some people to join us. What were your first thoughts on that?
Well, my immediate thought, as I think I said maybe the last episode, was maybe we should try for Vim, because nobody knows who he is and he knows everything about everything. But what do you know? We have a volunteer. Even better.
Yeah, joining us, our very first guest is Shane Driscoll from Bobcat Nation. Many of you might recognize him as DriscollCat. How you doing, Shane?
Good. It's good to be here, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for being here.
What kind of made you want to reach out to us and fill this spot for us, bud?
Well, I as you obviously can tell from the boards, I really love Bobcat football, and I love talking about it. And I feel like as much as I'm on the boards, I still don't even get enough of it. And I liked what you guys were doing. It's nice to have a fan podcast. That we have, the great stuff that Coulter puts together. But it's kind of from the unbiased perspective, and he's covering all the other teams, especially the Grizz and stuff like that. But you guys are just about the Bobcats, and I liked what you were doing, and I thought it might be nice to jump on and just talk with you guys for a bit.
Well, I appreciate that. And I was actually thinking about that. It's funny you say that, because I was thinking about one of the reasons that we might have started the podcast is we Ryan and I both live in Washington now, and I don't have anyone here to talk Bobcat football with, because no one follows the Bobcats out here. Maybe they follow Eastern if you're lucky, but not even that. So I think that this fills the void that we have living outside of Montana, being able to sit here and talk about Bobcat football from a complete fan perspective.
Yeah, I totally get that. I lived, my wife and I lived in Illinois for a few years, a little while back, and the cats were like a kind of a connection for me, just to feel a little bit connected to home. So I totally get that.
Nice.
Thorny, for me, it's kind of just a relief because we don't have to spend hours texting each other our thoughts anymore. we can just sit and BS for about an hour and get it out in one fell swoop. So that's been a benefit for me.
Get a serious case of keyboard thumb,
So Shane, when we were talking earlier, you had, I think, a really interesting question that came up, and you kind of mentioned, is Chope building a team versus a culture? And I just kind of want to get what your take was on that.
Yeah, I had been listening to a podcast, more general FCS podcast, and they talked about JMU and North Dakota State and how they're great year after year because they actually have a program, and that really no other FCS school has a program or like you say, a culture. And I mean, they were just kind of blunt about it. Like, really nobody has that, but JMU and North Dakota State. And I thought to myself, like, is that really true? Like, first of all, like, what does that mean? What is a program or a culture? And what would be the difference between putting a team together and putting a culture together? And then naturally the following question is, are we doing that? Is Coach Choate doing that here at Montana State? And so I don't know, I was thinking about that. And as I kind of thought about that, it's a little bit difficult for me to distinguish between, like, what does it mean to, like, kind of put together just a team versus a program. And I think, like what you said, culture kind of is a big part of it. I think that's a point of how you would differentiate just putting a team together versus a culture. But I don't know, what would you guys think a program is, if you wanted to say like these guys have a program, but those guys don't really? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'll let you go first, Thorny.
Well, it is hard to define the difference between a program, team, and culture. I mean, it all starts the program being the one that everyone is striving for. I mean, everyone's got some kind of culture, I would imagine, whether it's what the coach wants or not. You go back to the later part of the Ash years. I'm not exactly sure that's the culture Ash wanted, but that's kind of how it went. A lot of people say that Ash lost control of that team there. So I'm just kind of digressing here. But the point is, like, it's a culture kind of comes, and a good coach puts that down himself, but a culture is going to come regardless. But a program is, I think you have to go above just the football team. You have to go all the way up the athletic department. You have to have a president and athletic director who have a vision, a shared vision for the entire football team as a whole, and just where they fit on the national landscape, what they're competing for. Is that conference championships, national championships, winning seasons? I think that really it's a top-down process, and I think that is where most programs are just, in the general word of the program, like Montana State, Portland State, that's where it's hard to find that success, especially at this level when maybe there's not the booster money you might get somewhere else, the pressure from the community, the money, the support.
I think that's a good point there, Ryan, about like how a program can influence all levels of the culture and the team. When Shane really was talking about this, that's the very first time I actually kind of thought about it. And my first thought was the podcast you're listening to, was it like a Missouri Valley conference-based podcast, or?
I think so I listened to a couple of them. It's FCS Fans Nation and Hero puts one out. I don't remember which one it was, but I think it was one of the ones that has representatives from multiple conferences. Sure. Like, I think Eastern Washington is one of the people in it.
So when I was listening and I was kind of thinking about it, honestly, the first thing that came to mind was the very first question you talked about was team versus culture. Are you fielding a team? And to me, like, and a good example of that, and I might be wrong because we're obviously Bobcat fans, and so that's what we're in tune to. But I think of right now, started in Utah. it seemed like Southern Utah fielded a team last year, or maybe the 2 years, prior to that as well. In fact, Southern Utah has been good for a while, but they're kind of missing right now. They didn't really reload, like how other, like you say, programs they have that terminology, that gimmick saying, we don't rebuild, we reload. So, whereas then I thought about Jay Hill down at Weber State, man, he's really building a culture down there of toughness and resiliency, no matter who comes out to watch their games. Weber is a legit team and they are hard out. They don't need the fans to necessarily bring the energy for them. They can win regardless. So those two examples stuck out in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison. I think especially at our level that we can all kind of see what Jay Hill is doing. Those of us that are paying close attention, and we can tell that it's going to be. They lost a game they probably shouldn't have lost this weekend, but we can tell they're not just going to have a season like Southern Utah has had so far this year. They're going to have a bad day here and there, but they're not going to just totally tank for a season. But I wanted to look up a few numbers to just get an idea of what is this a difference? Is this a difference of quality, or is it? Or I should say, is it a difference of kind, or is it a difference of degree? And I think to a certain extent, you have to kind of just say everyone wants to establish a program that they can make successful. Of course, that's what they're going for, because they don't really just want that near-term success. But I think a lot of people do settle for that, taking maybe too many transfers or doing things that'll get you wins now versus establishing things that might be painful in the beginning, but in the long term yield dividends. But I was looking at some numbers, and I guess and these numbers come from the FBS because it's a little bit more difficult to, people are more interested in that. But I guess the average tenure for a head coach in the FBS is 3.8 years. And another number is, of the 128 current FBS coaches, 77% of them have been at their school for fewer than 6 years. And so that means that the seniors that had a redshirt year, percent of all of the FBS schools had a different coach that recruited them. I thought that those numbers were striking. I think it's really difficult to imagine establishing something that's lasting when you have kind of a transient coaching culture. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Well, that made me think of a point when you're talking about that is the longevity of building a program that takes some time. And that's where you kind of goes back to the point I'd made earlier, that you have to have a top-down administration that believes in your program, in your vision, in your culture. If they just sit there and they see year 3, they might not settle for that incremental growth that you've been having, that the culture you've been instilling. If it's not producing results, 3.8 years, like you said, you're gone. So you have to have the full support from the athletic department if you're truly going to build a program, especially if you're coming in and kind of starting from scratch, kind of like, Ash was in a lot of, or I'm sorry, Choate was in a lot of ways, because the end of the Ash era just ended in a thud, unfortunately, and and a complete different vision. Choate's vision of what the program would be is completely different. So I think that is definitely a part of his longevity, and it's doubly hard in the FCS, because if you're really successful, a bigger and better fish is going to come and get you, snag you up. So it's even harder to keep the good coaches at our level, because they're just going to be gone and start off somewhere else and get paid 10 times more money.
Yeah, that's a really good.
To me, it kind of seems like a little bit of a catch-22. It seems like some of these perennial powerhouses are trying to hold on to the vestiges of 20 years ago. You look at Nebraska, they're just at places like Texas, and people are just floundering and just like you said, have moved on from coach to coach to coach, because they're not once what they were. So,
well, they might not have the patience.
Yeah, exactly. And so there it is. There's the catch right there. So you give them 3 years and they didn't produce the results fast enough, and so on to the next guy to regain that momentum they had so long ago. I mean, point in case, the Grizzlies, after Halk left, they went through the whole thing until until now, like came full circle, right? So,
well, if you think about
question.
if you think about the best FCS programs that you can think of, most of them, like the historic programs like Appalachian State and even South Dakota State now and North Dakota State for a while, I can't speak to JMU because I'm not as familiar with them, but I know at least a handful of those schools had the same, like the coach had been there for more than a decade. Like Jerry Moore, I think was the coach at App State. He was there for like 18 years before they went on their crazy 3 or 4 in a row titles there in the early 2000s. And I know who was the coach at North Dakota State before the new guy? Was it Craig Bull, or is that the guy?
Now? Craig Bull over at
Wyoming. He was there for years, and he took the job at Wyoming. And I mean, that Stiegelmeier, I think, is the coach at South Dakota State. He's been there for like 20 some years. I mean, you can strike gold in the FCS, and typically when you do, just that stability, having the same coach, typically yields winning results. Even, I mean, look at Jerome Sowers down at NAU. You get the same thing pretty much every year, and NAU is okay with that, but they're usually a good team. They usually have a winning record. Most time, or they make the playoffs every few years, and they usually just get smacked out in the playoffs real fast, and that's they're okay with that. But that's not a bad program. Like I don't know what his overall record is, but I'm pretty sure he's won a fair amount more than he's lost. Just
he has the record for most wins in the conference, in the history of the conference.
Yeah, if you coach in the Big Sky for 20 years, you're bound to have it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ash would have got there eventually. He was pretty close, wasn't he? Wasn't Ash top 5?
I don't know. I don't know. There are a few people that had. Yeah, so I should just.
It's hard to find records in FCS for anything. It's hard to find Bobcat all-time records.
Yeah.
So I get that.
So Shane, what do you think? Given the question, which has been a fantastic question, by the way, what do you think Choate is doing? Where are we at right now in your eyes?
Yeah, and that's what I was just gonna say. Yeah, so like the next part of the question is he doing that here? And I think your point about Jay Hill at Weber State, I think he really reflects Jay Hill in a lot of ways. I think the way he's building the program, the types of things that he wants the program to hang its hat on, things like extremely stout defense and a good running offense, and just toughness in general. I think all of those things are really similar to Jay Hill, and I think that Coach Choate has the type of personality that can actually establish a top-down type of culture. I think it's really difficult to just get everyone kind of point in the same direction on something like culture, because people have different personalities, and people are different,
Yeah.
But when you have a guy like Choate, he's good at explaining things, and he really sticks to his guns. And I think some of those things really lend themselves to a top-down build like you need to have for something like a culture. And then as far as the program goes, I think it's difficult to say without knowing, more closely, but I do have a good feeling about where we'll be long-term, even if we do have, you want in their third year, you want to see some success, but even if we do have some kind of stumbles over the next couple of years, if we stick with him and give him the time, I think he could have something really nice put together.
Well, I can't disagree with that. I really like the direction Choate has come. It's a little frustrating with the offensive struggles he's had in all 3 years here, but overall, you have to like how the team competes, how the team plays, and just the mentality that we've had that we haven't had here since Kramer, I would guess. Yeah, Mike Kramer probably had similar traits as a coach. He was definitely a top-down kind of guy and had a toughness and a mentality to him. So it's kind of that style suits a Montana football team, because you can't throw the ball 40, 50 times a game in the middle of a freezing cold November day. So the culture, the type of program he's trying to instill, I like where it's headed, and I I think I was on the board talking about this the other day, maybe even on the question posted, the similar one, where I think, I'm not going to lie, I lost my train of thought there. So someone's going to have to come and rescue me here.
Well, Thorny,
mid-sentence, that's how I do it.
Thorny, I do think you can still pass it in November.
But not an air raid attack, though. Not, I mean, you can, and I'm not saying you can't. But if it's up to you, would you rather be trying? Would you rather have a successful running team and a hard no defense when it's 0 degrees out, or a team that's trying to complete slant routes all day long, throwing bombs? Yeah. When has it worked out in Montana? Like, that's what Stitt did. That's kind of what Ash did, and it worked out. But then it all came to a thud in the playoffs.
Well, to go back on the point where Shane was talking on, because I really don't have any more thoughts on Bob Stitt and all that stuff. But
of course,
where I think Montana State is right now is they're a really young team. With how many young guys we were playing, I think there was a stat. What was it? We had like 8 seniors right now that were playing or on our team. Regardless, ridiculously young. Once those guys get a taste for winning, that I believe they're starting to get, give Choate, like I said, a good 3 more years. I think he deserves 5 to 6 at least to run the tail of the tape. Because if we bring in, let's say, I mean, you see it on the board. If we bring in after a loss, guys would be like, "Oh, calm for Choate next year. Calm for Choate's hit. This has to change. This has to go. He has to go. This is ridiculous." We bring in another coach next year, let's say, or the year after that. Where are we at? All that culture that we've started to build, as Shane mentioned, the top-down toughness, this, like, you hear about the players just policing themselves now. The culture is policing itself. It's running itself, essentially. The thing they're doing is starting to generate its own momentum, and that's what you really want to build the program. It's basically going to recruit itself in the long run. And so I believe if we can get our offensive identity, I don't know if I want to use that word, but our offensive strategies, whatever we want to call it, buttoned down the way we want to, I think we have the defensive culture and identity to go with it. But I think that's all we're really missing right now. And eventually our young players are going to be those juniors and senior vets that it's going to be fun to watch in the next couple of years, in my opinion.
Thank you for finishing my point. That's what it was. It was the letting him have a few more years, even if he struggles. That's what I was trying to get to. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any closing thoughts on that, guys?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, cool. This is a hell of a question. Nice job, man.
Yeah, that was an interesting discussion. It was fun.
All right.
Right on. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Let's talk a little bit more before we let Shane go. I don't know if I want to let you go.
Couple questions.
You've been fantastic, man. Maybe have you on every week. See what happens.
Contributor.
Nice.
All right. I'll give you a menu of options. Tell me, you can pick from this, a 3-part question, or just choose one of them. Either a bold prediction, the most surprising, or the most disappointing thing of the season.
Oh man, I hate to go with most disappointing, but that's the one that's I think most relevant to specifically this. But I'll frame it this way. I genuinely, I really deep down thought we were going to win that game against Eastern, and I know that sounds silly and unreasonable, but. And I didn't going into it, but there was the week of the game, there was an interview with Coach Choate, and he just sounded so confident. And he was talking about how great Eastern Washington was, but he was enthusiastic about it. And I just interpreted that enthusiasm to be like, this is an exciting challenge, and I've got the answer for it. And so that then to have them come out and have the game go the way it did, not just to lose, but to really let it get away from you early and never really make it interesting. That was really disappointing for me this last weekend. So that was my biggest disappointment. I hate to focus on that one, but I can add a bold prediction if that helps out a little bit.
Well, no, I like the answer because it's pertinent to the most recent thing that happened. It's not some sort of general overall. It's like, wow, we should have won that game, and I can't argue with that. Like I thought we had a pretty good chance going into it too. So that's a good answer. I agree with that answer.
What about you, Thorny?
Cool.
Most disappointing thing?
Pick. You got the
I get a
prediction,
pick.
most surprising or most disappointing.
All right, bold prediction. We beat Weber State on the road.
Nice. I like it.
What do you think about
I
that?
love it.
You're encroaching on my bold prediction because I was going to.
We out Jay Hill.
I was going to say if we beat Weber State and Idaho State on the road because we have a back-to-back road trip, that's going to be tough. If we beat that. If we're go 2-0 on that trip, we're playoff bound.
Where did the Bengals come from? It's like what the hell? 8 touchdown passes in a game.
Yeah,
they just keep scoring more points every game. Like they were like 56, and then 60 some. Like just keep scoring more points.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be able to sustain that, but it's the best looking ISU team that has had in a while. So I'd be pretty happy if I was a Bengal fan right now. First time they've had any
Vandal fan.
Oh, I can't. How could you drop down? You're like, all right, well, we're dropping down. We're at least going to be able to be a pretty damn good team off the bat. No, we're just going to get smoked by everybody.
All of the cellar dwellers. Portland State, Idaho State. Jeez, guys.
Well, they beat Portland State, but
no, that's right. Sorry.
But that was only like 20-7, though. It was a pretty hard, tough-nosed game that had a lot of things go the Vandals' way, from what I understand. So it's still.
Oh, it's Davis. Although Davis is good this year, so I can't take too much away from that. But it's the one of the ones you think of as like a cellar dweller.
Yes, yeah, definitely traditional. It's always good to see teams have a good year. You don't want everyone. Yeah. You want to be the conference that has the same 3 or 4 terrible teams every year. You want some parity.
Yeah, UC Davis is definitely a top 3 team in the Big Sky right now for sure.
They're tough. I'm glad we don't have to play them.
Yeah, that was going to be my bold prediction: is that the Idaho State UC Davis game next week is going to go over 100 points.
I'm going to bet the over on that. Yeah, they'll cover. They'll hit 100.
Yeah.
All right, your turn, Ryan.
Well, let's see. I mean, we had a bold prediction, most disappointing. So I'll go with most surprising. I would say it's a toss-up between Jacque Allen, his play, and kind of the role he's been fitting, or Sean Borges, because honestly, I can't remember if I heard about Sean Borges before, but that guy's getting some significant play in his stats. I was looking at a couple of them today. He's had some tackles for losses, and he seems to be everywhere. His name is popping up all the time, so I don't know much about him, but he's making a splash for himself for sure.
Yeah, I love the way he plays. He's going to be working himself into some playing time. He's only a freshman, right?
Well, he's playing a lot. I mean, he's out there quite a bit.
He is. I'm just saying, like he was in the Eastern game a lot in the dime package, but he's going to be pushing for a starting job next year.
Yeah, he might be a redshirt freshman, because he earned a scholarship. I remember he was a guy that earned a scholarship at the summer. At the very end of the summer, they had that banquet at Cruzado's house, and so I remember that announcement. But the other thing,
it looks like he did.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
I guess Jacque Allen just seems to be fitting in, and that's the biggest surprise for me too. Is typically our drop downs. We've had a really, kind of hit and miss with that, and more miss than hit, I feel like. And it seems like he seems like a dude, like he just gets it. So I've been really impressed with him.
Well, he had to sit out a year and pay for some own classes, right? Like last year.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, so I mean, that's dedication. If a guy just loves football that much, he just wants another chance to play one more time before he has to hang his cleats up. And those are the kind of guys that have success that when they drop down. The guys that just want to play, realize they weren't going to get a play, not and felt like they were entitled to a play, but just they want to play. They just need a chance to prove themselves, and those are the guys that succeed.
Yeah, have you guys ever watched Last Chance U?
I have not, actually. I've been wanting to.
It's really good. It's an extremely well done documentary, but you can see it's just hard when you've played at the highest college level. I mean, they were dropping much further, but I mean, you can imagine with these guys too. There's a big difference between Virginia Tech and Montana State, and I think it's just hard to keep yourself mentally there and up. And he's done an unbelievable job of that.
Well, he had a couple quotes, I think, in the fall camp where he was like, yeah, it's a little easier than it was at Virginia Tech, It's not surprising. Like, I think Choate runs a pretty tight ship, but not like a team that's going to be the national 25 FBS conversation is going to run.
For sure.
You can still have the same toughness, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But I'm just talking about, like, the workout drills and maybe, like, practices and time you have to put in the film room and all this stuff. Yeah. So, I don't know. That's kind of my assumption, and Jacque kind of alluded to that a couple times.
Can I sneak a bold prediction in there?
You may.
I don't want to take it because I'll say it, but I'll say it with a caveat. Somebody mentioned it on the Bobcat Nation today, and I had thought about it. But this goes back to this bye week we just had. Choate was talking about they run a practice where they let the freshmen play. They call it I think he calls it the Candy Bowl or something like that. Instead of like the Super Bowl,
that's what it was.
The Candy Bowl. And his quote was of something like, Casey Bowman can really sling it. A bold prediction right there would be Casey Bowman getting some playing time before the end of the year.
That's pretty bold. That's a bold one.
And someone said that on the Nation today, and I didn't want to. I'm going to. Shane might know, but I can't remember who said it. But I was like, well, I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I don't remember who said I saw that. So you're not gonna go for this weekend, but you'll say by the end of the year.
Yeah, I say by the end of the year.
Well,
I don't think we're going to continue with this. This Troy Anderson. Oh gosh. I don't even want to get in that. That's whatever on that.
We go on that every single week. And maybe we'll get that after this segment, but let's cool the jets on that.
Sounds good. All right. Well, that's about all I had on my end. But hey, Shane, man, that was awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for coming on.
All right, take care, guys.
All right. Well, that was our first guest, DriscollCat. What do you think about that, Thorny?
It was a lot of fun, and I think he posed a great question. It was really fun to discuss, something besides how the game went, maybe something besides X's and O's, and certainly something besides, a whole entire segment devoted to Troy Anderson. So it was a nice nice change of pace. It was a good question. I'm glad we had him on, and I want to thank him for his time.
Yeah, Shane did a fantastic job, and again, Shane took that on his own volition to kind of reach out to us. If you want to reach out to us, if you want to be a part of our CatCast that we're doing here, there's a couple ways you could get a hold of us. One, we have a Twitter account, and I checked it today, Thorny. We have a whopping 4 follows, and 2 of them are you and me. So there's 2 other people out there that we've duped into following the R&R CatCast.
Nice.
And
doubled our viewership or our readership.
It's pretty sorry. Not going to lie. But I think it's still awesome. We have a cool little logo. I like our logo.
It took me like 5 minutes. So
spot on, though.
Yeah.
It's spot on. Also, you can also reach out to Celtic Cat or Common Cat, which is me, on Bobcat Nation, and just give a private message, and then we can coordinate from there. So again, thanks to Shane for volunteering his time, and it was just a fun segment. But now let's move on to Idaho homecoming.
Well, yeah, it's pretty fun homecoming opponent, I think, and it's kind of a apropos even for Idaho because I think they have quite a bit of guys on their staff with Montana connections, or even just directly from Montana. I was listening to a little bit of the press conference from Choate today, and he brings up a good point. They're going to be fired up. It's going to be homecoming for them too, especially Bobby Daly. Not even that long ago, he was playing on the field. He's coming back to here, so it's going to be pretty interesting dynamic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I went and looked at their coaching staff. They got Mike Bresky. They got 2 Bresky guys. Another Carroll College guy that I'm blanking on right now. Their cornerbacks coach is Vernon Smith, I believe. I believe he was a Grizz cornerback. And so, yeah, they're going to have a lot of, at least within the coaching staff, a lot to play for. So I imagine they want to bring it for sure. And probably, they're going to get a good crowd for a homecoming. And so they're probably going to play off that energy and just look to, upset our day.
Well, I think last week is probably one of the more raucous crowds that they played in this year. I mean, they went down to Fresno State, lost 13-79. That's brutal, but they were over at Pocatello here last weekend, and they had a good crowd over there as far as Idaho State crowds go, about 11,000. I don't know if it sold out. I had read that they were anticipating a sellout, but so that was the most hostile crowd they'll have faced yet. It'll be bigger in Bozeman especially, but they got shellacked by Idaho State. Did you follow any of that last week? Or Saturday, I guess?
Tangentially. I wasn't like following updates. I saw, highlights. It just seemed like, Idaho State was just throwing it all over the field, completing they're just slinging it everywhere. So it was just, they just throttled them. I was wondering though, like, do you think that's going to turn into their cat graze?
I don't know if they're going to see it that way. I actually had some time here at work today. I have the ability to listen to music or anything I want while I'm at work, and I was kind of listening to this Idaho podcast. I didn't have a recent one, but they had one last week kind of leading up to the Idaho State game, and it was pretty interesting, the comments that they had for Idaho State. They did not think much of Idaho State. They clearly considered them like a little brother. They didn't think they were going to – they all thought they were going to win the game fairly handily. They kind of talked down the quarterback. They didn't think he was all that special. They thought he was – at best, he was maybe slightly better than Mason Petrino, which is the quarterback that played most of the games this year for Idaho. And it was pretty interesting. So I don't know if they're going to consider a rivalry, because I think Idaho is always going to be fixated on Boise State, whether even the different division. Maybe they'll come around to seeing that there's more rivalries, natural rivalries for them here in the Big Sky. But I think Montana is going to be probably who they consider the biggest rival. Probably Idaho State number 2, and Eastern Washington right up there as well. But
geographically, that makes sense. It is interesting. It seems like Idaho is like the unwanted child. I mean, I was doing a little bit of research. It looks like they've bounced around since being a charter member of the Big Sky in 1965. They've gone to 5 different conferences, including the Sun Belt twice, and being independent for a year after the WAC pretty much just dissolved in like 2012. So they're really getting no love from anybody. So I'm interested to see who they try to attach themselves to now that they're in the Big Sky. I know they have that rivalry with the Grizzlies, and they call that the Little Brown Stein game.
yes,
and I'm interested because they play the Grizz at home right before they go on the road to, you guessed it, Florida.
Oh man,
to end the year. So that should be a fun game down in Moscow. So I don't know. I'm just kind of interested to see kind of where they find their niche.
Yeah, that's going to be tough for them, because most of them, if you go over that board, just be warned. If you go over to their message board, most of them aren't happy they're even here. The ones that are still on there are, it's bad over there. I don't even know. They're not happy being here. They're like, well, if we're going to get blown out, we might as well be in FBS and be getting blown out. So They certainly haven't really found a home yet. I think if they would have had some more success right out of the gate, things might be a little bit better mood down there. But it's tough. They've dropped down, and they've only kind of gotten kicked around so far by pretty much everybody except for Portland State.
Yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, honestly, because I thought they would be more excited, being more regional. In the Sun Belt's not regional for them, so I don't really understand that. I mean, 2016, they had like a 9-4 season over there, went to the Boise Potato Bowl or whatever they call it down there, and they beat Colorado State in like an epic battle that was like had 110 combined points or something like that. But that's pretty much it. They went last year, I can't remember, it was 4-7 or, a losing record regardless. And so I don't know why people are so upset. I haven't visited their fan board, but I imagine it's just some old stalwarts trying to voice their opinions on that forum.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of want to talk a little bit about just what it means to have Idaho in the conference. Like you were kind of talking about, such a good regional fit. They're a flagship university. They're a good academic institution. It's nice to have a university of that prestige and whatnot in the conference. Besides, like, no offense to the Southern Utahs or the Northern Colorados, but it's nice to have kind of more of a peer institution back in the conference. And of course, that's not how they feel about it. And I'm not sure, they're going to ever feel like that. I don't think they've felt equal, like you said, anywhere they've gone. They followed Boise State up and never had the same success as Boise State. They just had a hard time. But I think this is going to be the best fit for them, and I think it's going to be good for the Big Sky Conference, assuming they can get competitive, and I think they will. I think they're just having a little bit of a shock. Maybe they didn't quite anticipate how good football actually is in the Big Sky. I think I've always thought that maybe the top three conferences in the Big Sky or in the FCS could easily compete with the bottom three in the FBS, pretty equal across the board. So I think they're finding out that football down here is not so bad. Pretty damn good, really.
Well, absolutely. I would assume it's a player thing. I believe, as we were talking with DriscollCat, I think it might be a culture thing now. Like, maybe they got their feelings hurt and they're just like, some guys are just like, well, I don't know if I'm bought into this yet. I was bought into playing the Sun Belt, but I don't know about the Big Sky quite yet. And I might take them, a little while to turn that ship around. I think what concerns me as a Cat fan is them coming in and, having that chip on their shoulder. The coaches being like we said, like kind of a homecoming for them. It could be really dangerous. They're employing a 2-quarterback system, and oh boy, we've talked at length about that. I don't believe in a 2-quarterback system. That's well documented on this CatCast. One of them being the coach's son, Mason Petrino, who seems to be more kind of the guy who's getting the most snaps. I think he has more. He has a better running ability. The other guy, Colton Richardson, who seems to be more of the gunslinger. He came in for Matt Linehan last year, a 4-year starter for them, who had tremendous success for them. I guess if you could call that success at Idaho. So 2 different type of guys, a passer and then more of a complete quarterback in Petrino.
Well, it's interesting. I was kind of listening to that podcast and maybe read the message board, and I guess Richardson, that was his 4th game, so there are some people calling for him to be redshirted, so that blows by his redshirt. So I assume we'll see Richardson. I wouldn't be surprised to see Richardson start. The Cats have been hurt a little bit by the passing game, but we've also been hurt more by a mobile quarterback. So I guess if you were Petrino, you probably start Petrino against the Cats, but certainly give him a go around and see how he performs, and maybe you can always bring in Richardson if Petrino falls flat. It'll be interesting to see who they come out with, because, mobile quarterbacks have always kind of given the Cats a little bit of fits.
Right? Yeah. I don't feel like our defense is going to be the problem in this game. it's going to be the big question for me is like, what are we going to be doing offensively? And I probably going to roll out Troy Anderson. Choate said on his presser today, every day he's looking more like a quarterback. Excuse me if I don't sound enthused behind this microphone, but I hope he does. I hope he's dissecting those coverages a little easier. I hope as they say, the game is slowing down for him. But until we figure that out, I'm really not holding my breath for much offensive productivity. Yeah, that's that word. From the Cats.
How many Miller Lights have you had? So there's a couple things here matchups that kind of give me a pause here. I mean, I don't want to dismiss Idaho because I think they're a talented football team and they could easily come into Bozeman and whip us. So all this talk about the program kind of in shambles, maybe having a hard time finding their footing, getting blown out. They still got plenty of talent on their team, and if they can figure it out, they're going to be a hard team to beat. One thing that does concern me, they are a -11 in their turnover margin, which is pretty terrible. They've only forced, I can't remember. They've only forced one turnover all year. Can you believe that? Isn't that like one of the worst stats you've ever heard?
Well, I mean, it sounds a little bit like our defense, not too long ago. But go ahead.
The next part was the Bobcats are second worst at 4. But what concerns me is in the game is, their -11 turnover. That's one of the biggest reasons they've had a really hard time. I think they had 4 against Fresno State. I don't know what they were against Idaho State. I can't remember. Let's see. I got the stats right here.
Do you know if they're fumbles or like interceptions?
You mean their turnovers? I think a lot of them are interceptions.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to say is like that's really what's kind of shot themselves in the foot, and the Cats are almost equally bad at getting the ball back. So if we don't succeed in creating the turnovers, I think Idaho has a much better chance of staying in this game than they would in a game where they turn the ball over 2 or 3 times right out of the gate, get steamrolled, and the game's over by halftime. I think Idaho has a good chance of sticking around if we can't create some turnovers.
Yeah, I don't see the Cats. I don't see this as a blowout game.
No,
not at all. So,
nope. But one thing that is in our favor is they're pretty much second or third to last in red zone defense, and we are first in the red zone offense. So that bodes well right there if we can get down the red zone. Because as Choate repeatedly says, like the game nowadays is about who can stop each other inside the 20s, because anyone can move the ball between the 20s. It's when to get in the red zone, the situational defense, red zone defense. And we've excelled in the red zone offense this year, and they've been really bad in red zone defense. So I think that's a big advantage for us.
Absolutely. I would like to see, ideally, I'd like to see going in the fourth quarter with maybe a 2-touchdown lead. That'd be refreshing.
It would. Yes, it would. It's almost like that we drag the team in the fourth quarter when we don't necessarily need to be getting them in deep water. We could have just had it over with in the third quarter, but it's almost like we want to make things harder on ourselves than we necessarily need them to be. But
all right, Thorny, before we wrap this up, just looking ahead quickly to the second half of the season.
Well, let's real quick. Do you want to wager a score prediction? Ooh. Are you willing to do that here on this podcast?
I typically stay away from score predictions, just again based off of superstitions that I hold.
Fair enough. How about a WL?
I do think we win this game.
Okay. I do think we do too. I don't think it's going to be as easy as some might think, but I think the Cats do win by 2 scores.
I'd be pleasantly happy if we could win by 2 scores.
That might be 8 or 9 points, but that's 2. So that's my little prediction. I'm not going to get into the scores yet. I don't like to do that necessarily, but go back to your point here. I just wanted to interject real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump ahead. So after homecoming this week, we go on the road 2 weeks in a row, Weber and Idaho State. and then we come back home for 2 games against Cal Poly Northern Colorado, and finish up against that second-ranked university across the hill. We got a tough road trip in 2 weeks, so I think that's gonna be the tail of the tape. If we can go 2-0 in Weber through Idaho State, I believe we're playoff bound. Even if we go 1-1 there, I think we have a legitimate shot as long as we win this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, this next 3-game stretch here, winning 2 is pretty much where we need to be. It's kind of funny if you looked at the schedule even 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, you would think that Idaho State might be the easier of the 2 Idaho games, but here we are flip-flopped thinking, all right, Idaho at home is probably an easier contest than going down to Idaho State. And Idaho State's been playing well. It's hard to say how much of that is real, but I think Idaho have a good chance of winning. Weber State, I made my bold prediction last, or I guess with DriscollCat there, that we are going to go down to Weber and win. So Idaho State might be where we have the hardest time. I don't know. I just feel good about the Weber State game for some reason. I think we might match up well with them. Idaho State, they're going to air it all over the place. It's going to be a little bit harder for us to defend. So, yeah, I think 2-1 out of that stretch. And then Cal Poly and Northern Colorado are both certainly winnable games at home, leading up to that showdown with the Harvard of the West or whatever they call themselves.
Don't even dignify them with that.
Self-titled Harvard.
You could call them the Pinkies.
So I think we have a good shot here to only lose one more game going into Cat Grizz. I don't like to talk too much about the future and think about how the team's going to perform because there's a game right here in front of us. But the rest of our schedule works out where I think we have a good chance of being right on the cusp of a playoff spot.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Do you think we come out in any kind of special uniforms this weekend?
I wouldn't mind seeing us do a nice throwback. Who doesn't like the 84 throwbacks? But I don't know. Might be a special occasion enough for that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I'd imagine we might do the all gold business.
Yeah, I'm always crossing my fingers. I love those 84 throwbacks as well, especially just like the classic yellow, the helmet with the blue script on there. That just so classic.
Yep.
It's just
it's a nice sharp look.
Yeah, when we wore those back in 2015 when we played UND, I was in heaven. I'm a big uniform guy, so I've been lobbying for those to come back ever since.
Yeah, I mean, if those came in once a year, I'd be happy. Those are sweet.
Right on, man. Well, I think we should wrap this thing up, Thorny.
Yeah, just a bit of a shorter one here. We didn't have any sort of game to review, so we got the nice little segment with DriscollCat, a little bit of a preview here, and I mean, what else is there to say? Go Cats! I think we come out with the victory. I think we got this.
Yeah, I'm not going to give any predictions based on my superstitions, but
very important.
I guess it is a prediction going with the win.
You can rescind it. It's not too late.
No, I'm going to go with the win. I'm looking forward already to the Weber because it reminds me of one of my favorite plays as a fan, watching Jody Owens stuff a 1 yard. Mm-hmm. Remember that touchdown at the very end to seal that game. We'll talk about that next week, though.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's a good segment to say for next week.
Right on, buddy.
Well, it's been fun.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.